転校生の今千秋さんです。よろしくお願いしますのです。
If I ever needed a good reason to love a director, there it is. I think I brought this director up once all the way back during the first part of my Sweet review, and since she did direct today's subject, I think it's a good time as any to highlight one of my favorite anime directors ever, Chiaki Kon. It's especially appropriate now that they're remaking what I consider to be her magnum opus, the anime adaptation of Higurashi no Nakoroni, which, yes, I'm looking forward to, though I'll also admit that I'm just a little bit concerned that director Keiichiro Kawaguchi might be stretching himself a little bit too thin, since he might end up directing 3 series at once. Though frankly, it's no big deal to me, as I do own the most complete version of the original game, plus the Blu-rays, which, yeah, I doubt I'll be able to recapture Kon's magic for this adaptation. Her directing style just kinda speaks to me, as she tends to use a very minimalist style. Part of that might be because she often works with JC staff, who aren't exactly known for their quality animation, aside from a good Aqua crying scene. But still, in spite of minimal budget, she can build a scene incredibly well and generate all sorts of emotions in the viewer, be it fear, sadness, and of course in the case of today's subject, happiness. She knows how to punctuate scenes at just the right moment for the optimum effect. And as that clip at the beginning showed, she has an absolute love for the medium of anime. Thus, unlike some of her peers, she'll actually try to understand the appeal of any source material she's given. There's just a sincerity to her style that I think is lacking in many other anime directors these days. And considering that this film was one of her very few contributions to this franchise, I think it's worth celebrating. So with that in mind, let's take a look at Happiness Charge Precure, the ballerina of the Doll Kingdom, and see what Miss Kon can do when given a decent budget. Our film opened not with a Miracle Light tutorial? You see what I mean when I say this director gets me? I mean, yeah, we are still going to get a fourth wall breaking tutorial in just a minute, but still, at least they're working it into the actual film and making it somewhat entertaining thanks to Mio and... Oh yeah, I did mention this character at the end of my last Happiness Charge review, didn't I? This is our special guest character of the film, Funassyi, the unofficial mascot of Funabashi Chiba. This genderless pear fairy was originally created by a local to both cheer up its residents and promote the town. And through the power of social media, it managed to garner a significant following and eventually appeared on some variety shows, released a few CDs, and even got its own anime. Though for many, Funassyi's big breakout moment was probably what they were referencing here. Now, imagine that, but with a few more Michael Bay explosions. Yes, as a part of a prank on some Japanese game show, because of course if anything insane happens, it's all part of a Japanese game show. They had this poor fairy walk onto a field lined with a bunch of very real explosives and started setting them off with no warning. Hold on, let me just check my photo gallery, and yep, that is the most Japanese thing I've seen today. And the most amazing thing about all of this was that not only did Funassyi manage to outrun all of the explosives, some of which, yeah, you can see were just inches away, not only did they escape pretty much unharmed, but the suit actor actually managed to stay in character the whole time. I mean, seriously, just look at how cumbersome that costume looks. If it were me, I would have torn that thing off and started running and never stopped running as soon as I heard the first explosion. I'd also probably kick this dude with the punk sign in the balls. Yet, for the sake of maintaining kayfabe, Funassyi remained the ever-lovable giant fruit it is. Needless to say, compared to the other guest stars who either sounded stiff as all hell or were just really miscast. This was by far the greatest acquisition Toei had ever made. Good job, guys. Good job. Anyway, as I said, these two and the show's mascots provided the Miracle Lights tutorial, which was incorporated well, helped by the fact that we got a very well animated fight just a moment earlier as the team took down a Diamond Terabad. Worth mentioning that the animation director of this film was Kazuhiro Ota, an extremely talented animation director both in and out of this franchise. This guy is going to become a lot more relevant in the following season, so just remember his name. Though quite frankly, I don't think anything is going to be able to top what he does with Funassyi here. Seriously, that's going to give me nightmares. Anyway, they ended the fight with their finisher that would soon be retired in the show proper for that J-pop finisher. And their heroism was being watched by this girl named Tsumugi. Hey, look on the bright side, kid. You're eventually gonna become a source of a ton of memes for this franchise. Also, Horie ends up working a lot with Kon for some reason. Actually, she was sad over the fact that she had experienced sudden paralysis of her legs and thus had to give up on her dream of becoming a ballerina. However, she soon found comfort with this totally trustworthy looking gentleman. Wow, Goyan is looking a lot better after he stopped taking all those steroids. Meanwhile, the Precure were putting on a little puppet show of Snow White for some kindergartners that probably would have made Miyuki cry over its low production value. This ended up reawakening Hime's aspirations of being a real prince. Oh, you have my condolences, Yona. It must be tough having an unconscious boyfriend. Amongst the marionettes, Megumi found a familiar but out-of-place doll. Of course, it turned out to be Tsumugi, who had become the ambassador of a place called the Doll Kingdom. I mean, sure, we had to kind of blow away and enslave that previous kingdom of toys as soon as its leader abdicated the throne, but we are all perfectly peaceful. However, Terabads had somehow invaded the kingdom, and she wanted to enlist the Precure's help, which half of the team happily accepted. They arrived in the kingdom and okay, I stand corrected. They didn't take over the kingdom of toys, they took over Dreamland. Damn, King DDD could never catch a break. Of course, the fun times had to come to a bit of a halt after they gave Blue a call to inform him of where they were. Wow, I just keep loving this movie more and more every second. However, before they had any time to worry about the Putz God, they were suddenly attacked by a windmill Terabad that strangely didn't have a host like usual. In fact, after they defeated it in a short but really well animated fight, I love how this film doesn't rely on stock animations, it just disappeared and didn't say the usual defeated lines, and they didn't even receive any new cards. I guess the marketing team must have gotten back the low sales numbers and just figured they may as well cut their losses. In the kingdom, they made a prince right out of Hime's dreams both in this film and in the main series. Of course, she immediately fell for the guy and started to do, I think, her mating dance in front of him. We already did enough JoJo references in the main show. Not that I wouldn't want to see Oritsuki fight this dude. He led them to a parade to celebrate their arrival, and okay, could someone tell Kon this isn't Higurashi and she's not supposed to terrify us with all these dead-eyed little plushies? Actually, generating an uneasy atmosphere might have been the point, as even though they had gone along with all of this, Yuko and Iona could sense that something was a little off, from the unusual Terabad to the fact that Tsumugi just knew their secret identities. Dope, can't think about it too much or else we wouldn't have a plot now, would we? And just to make sure the plot kept going smoothly, Seiji, whom I hadn't brought up throughout this review because he didn't really contribute anything significant, was captured and dollified, pretty much making him a completely useless character in this film. Though to be fair, I do think he was treated better here than he was in the final arc of the main series. At least he wasn't treated like a prop to further a repetitive love triangle. And things continued to slowly go south for our protagonist as the team was split up by Zeke and Tsumugi. Terabad soon appeared in front of all of them, who are much stronger than the average strength, with even Yuko's freaking meteor not even scratching them. Though, while the 6 Rangers were having a hard time, Hime arguably suffered the worst amongst her team after learning the truth behind the kingdom's residents, as well as Zeke himself. As it turned out, they were all actually Tsumugi's dolls brought to life and were working together with the Terabats to defeat the Precure for the sake of their master. Of course, for Hime, the portrayal wasn't the main issue, but rather the fact that she unknowingly tried to NTR a doll. Have I mentioned yet how this character is my favorite of the season? In all seriousness, Megumi was also betrayed by Tsubuki, and also learned the tragic reasoning behind why she decided to work with the villain of this film, Black Fang. I mean, again, he didn't even try to hide the fact that he was evil, and even admitted to being a member of the Phantom Empire. Though, as we'll see later, he was also likely a rogue member of the Empire. Still, with his help, not only did he bring all of her dolls to life, but he also restored her legs, as we saw through this convenient flashback projector, and yeah, just ignore those bracelets. For whatever reason, the characters can't seem to see them. I don't know, maybe it's only visible to us, the audience.
Well, that's just lazy writing.
Anyway, while Megumi pointed out the obvious, Tsubuki countered probably with the most potent words our heroine has ever heard. I really like this concept. Basically, in order to do their usual thing and save the world and all that, the Precure might very well have to sacrifice the happiness of one small little girl in order to do it. I mean, obviously, they had to stop Black Fang, but if you kill the devil involved in a Faustian bargain, then wouldn't that mean the deal would also be off? It would kind of put our heroines in a morally gray area, but they could also find ways of consulting Tsubuki through her paraplegia. That's the story that I wish they had gone with, but as we'll soon see, they unfortunately took the easy way out. Anyway, unable to defeat their respective opponents, the Precure were forced to make a tactical retreat. In the case of Iona and Yuko, their fairy partners ended up being captured and put through the dollification process, and they looked no different than they usually do. See, this is what happens when you make your characters overly toyetic. We also got a really good scene of Tsubuki trying to, and ultimately failing at, justifying her actions to herself, with Yui Horie's acting really selling it.
Tsubuki.
I would say this was the moment the executives decided to cast her as Liko, but really, Ho-chan has always been an amazing actress. Also, I'm just realizing, but this is basically a scene between Balor and Maria, and unfortunately I can't say this was one of Chiaki Kon's better works. Heck, forget about the Higurashi remake, can't we get an Umineko remake instead? We never even made it past the question art because it was such a failure. But I digress, and that's a subject for another day. We also got a good scene between the Cures as they consulted Megumi through a legitimately difficult struggle with her morality. If they really wanted to push Megumi as the main character of the final arc, they really needed to work in more scenes like this where she would have to question her general morality and ideals, and not just stuff related to the blue cleavage. Of course, since she was still pretty much the main heroine by this point in the series, Hime led her team in consulting her friend. With her resolve restored, Megumi led the way back towards the castle. Meanwhile, Black Fang had arrived and really started to go full on Mephisto on this poor girl. And already, I love this villain a million times more than any of the so-called baddies in the main show, as well as a few more recent series. Why do I review this franchise? Anyway, the Precure arrived, and Megumi rightfully pointed out that while she could live her dreams in this world, deep down Tsubuki knew she could never find true happiness here because it is just a dream world. Again, I really love this setup and think it could have made for one of the most powerful messages about overcoming hardships that this franchise has ever told, but... You know which clip I have to use. You blew it! I'll say right now, I love almost everything about this film, except for this one twist that does unfortunately docket a few points in my book. For this season, I have been trying to look at it from the creator's intent rather than just my own expectations. And I do think I know what they were trying to go for here, making Black Fang into an even bigger monster, which they did succeed at, as we'll get into in just a minute. But man, does this feel like such a cop-out. Basically, rather than having Tsubuki suffer through a tragic but also very real handicap that could emerge at any point in a person's life, including childhood, we instead have it all being orchestrated by an evil wizard, a boogeyman if you will. Heck, I honestly believe this wasn't going to be the original route they were going to go down, as even evidenced by some scenes later in the movie that seem to suggest that this was a last-minute change. And before anyone brings it up, even though I know someone probably will, earlier in the film, they showed us, the audience, Black Fang's locks appearing on Tsubugi's legs, foreshadowing this very obvious twist. But you know, with just a little editing, we could also remove the frames of the locks appearing, and now it just looks like Tsubugi was naturally succumbing to her paraplegia. And from here, the film could just play out pretty much exactly the same, but now the Precure and Tsubugi would have to deal with the aftermath of her once again losing her legs, which then could lead into a bittersweet but very powerful ending. But no, I bet some toy higher-ups thought that was a little too realistic, so they just decided to make it all a part of Dark Fang's Keikaku, ignoring the fact that it shouldn't be that hard to find any random kid suffering from a disability they could manipulate. And also so that Tsubugi can make a blink and you'll miss it cameo in the final episode. This is why this franchise can't have any nice things. Worst of all are the unfortunate implications this movie makes about people with disabilities like paraplegia and how they can't become productive or fulfilled members of society. Y'all really should be taking after Peter Griffin's beliefs.
Cripple, 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 damn it!
Now, with all that said, I will give the film this. My god, does it make for a great villain as a result? Again, while I do think his methods of not just going with a kid who was naturally handicapped were inefficient, Black Fang is one of the most outright evil villains in the entire franchise. I mean, there's no getting around it. He crippled a little girl just to have a battery for his despair-powered doomsday device. I don't think even the literal embodiment of despair was this sadistic, at least she didn't break any legs. On top of that, he even played the I may be evil, but you're no different card on Tsubugi for tricking the Precure. He really is just a massive heel that, while I should call him a two-dimensional baddie, he just does it with so much gusto that I really do wish he had been the true final boss of the main series. Heck, he even mentioned that he was planning to overthrow Queen Mirage, and Tsubugi's despair was greater than hers, which actually makes a lot of sense considering that she was being brainwashed by Red for most of the series, and as a result came off as more apathetic rather than in despair. Remember, evil villains, never accept artificial despair, always go organic. But yeah, I wouldn't even doubt that this guy would have surpassed Red, a literal god. At least his goals were clear and concise. Also, fun fact, Black Fang shares a voice actor with a certain Final Fantasy character. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of him. Zeke tried to pull a Cloud, and yeah, maybe get a bigger sword next time, dude. However, he was able to cut through some of the Precure's binds, eventually letting them break free after he and all of Tsubugi's other dolls were off by Cephafang. And Megumi, the character who usually gives long-winded speeches about happiness, gave the most appropriate response. Yeah, that's gonna be like the equivalent of an FU from one of the most lawful of lawful goods. The Cures tried to make their way to Tsubugi as her despair continued to grow and spread thanks to Black Fang providing her with a live feed of the chaos. We got even more really good action with everyone using attacks that unfortunately wouldn't carry over into the main show, and eventually Megumi managed to make her way to the little whoopee. And again, while I do have my issues with her usurping the real lead of the show proper, I will say these are really great lines. Not every day you see a protagonist admitting they spouted nothing but platitudes. Kind of wish some shonen protagonists would take notes. Honestly, great stuff here. Though, do you also notice how Megumi never points out how, by defeating Black Fang, they might be able to restore Tsubugi's legs, and in fact, kinda makes it sound like they're going to try and help her through her disability? I mean, maybe you could say they're not sure whether or not the curse will be broken, but still, I smell last-minute rewrites. Regardless, Megumi managed to break Tsubugi out of her despair spiral, and the two escaped. Tsubugi also denounced this dream world, resulting in the release of Seiji, the fairies, and Blue. Well, everyone except for my brother and my girlfriend, who I just locked away from Malaya because screw them. Still, Black Fang had collected enough despair that he could go one-winged angel. Man, I love that song. And surprisingly, Safer Fang was a lot stronger than in his original fight. Damn it, they lied about this Korean remake, didn't they? And he was able to KO everyone except for Megumi, which of course led into the Miracle Light scene, though I'll let this one pass just because of this character. So, with the power of the Pear Fairy, plus a really awesome insert song sung by all 4 of the Cure's VAs, Megumi unlocked her movie-exclusive super form. Again, not a huge fan of a single Cure getting all of the power-ups, though, at least in this case, the rest of her team joined in the final blow. And in general, this whole sequence was just awesome with some great animation, and again, one of my favorite insert songs ever, Where Courage is Born. Look it up. And with that, they defeated the child of Genova, Tsubuki woke up back in her room surrounded by all of her doll friends, and they held on this shot of her leg while she cried. Yeah, again, almost makes you think that this was supposed to end with her not being able to use her legs. But nope, the movie ended with the very next scene of the team going to see her at a ballet recital, ignoring the fact that she would probably still need at least a few months of rehab in order to overcome any sort of atrophy. But whatever, happy endings all around, except for maybe Hime. This movie was unfortunately a little bit of a box office bomb, but not through any fault of its own. It came out in the middle of a typhoon that year. It did become somewhat of a sleeper hit the following week when the storm had died down, but still, it is really a shame that this movie didn't get all the attention it deserved, because to me, this is in the upper tiers of Precure films. Production-wise, this was absolutely one of the best Precure movies I've ever seen, with Chiaki Kon's impeccable direction just knocking it out of the park. While the main series definitely had its ups and downs, with a little more of the latter, this film throughout looked great with plenty of fluid and smooth animation, as well as just some great colors and designs, which has always been kind of a thing with this season. But yeah, this film not only had some of the best fight scenes of the franchise, but also some of the funniest, with just some hilarious expressions, and again, the director's great sense of timing. The only thing missing here was Rena trying to take Tsubuki home with her or something. She just knows when to make things go quiet to let the audience absorb everything, like Hime's reaction faces, or Tsubuki's betrayal, and the emotional shock it inflicts upon Megumi. Good stuff. And on that note, let's get into the movie characters, specifically Tsubuki, Zeke, and Black Fang. Proto Liko is pretty much the definition of a whoopee. Just a character whose very unfortunate misery is the driving force behind the film. Is it a little emotionally manipulative? Yeah, kind of. But for the message that I think they were originally trying to send, don't worry, we'll get into that, about overcoming hardships was told a little better than what they tried to do in the main series with a certain deity. And Tsubuki herself was fairly fleshed out for a movie character, as we did get to see her honest conflictions over betraying her icons. And while what she was doing was objectively wrong, we also couldn't really blame her for not wanting to give up her legs, especially when so many of her doll friends were backing her. By extension, Zeke also somewhat shared in his master's arc. Yeah, he wasn't necessarily the most important character in this film, but he was a part of the 2 most emotional scenes of the film, both his sacrifice, and again that great bit with Hime. But of course, he didn't have nearly as much presence as our main villain. It says something when he was the only major villain in this entire season who never got any sort of redemption because, quite frankly, Black Fang didn't deserve any. And honestly, I kind of miss these sorts of irredeemable monsters in my Precure shows. Not everyone needs to be forgiven, and sometimes we just need a character to come off as powerful and threatening. The way this dude manipulated an innocent little girl was just as intimidating as it was disgusting. Just a perfect example of a villain you love to hate. Though this also leads into my one and only really significant problem with this film. Black Fang's evil plan that had maybe one step too many. As I pointed out, I really do think the original script had it so that Tsubuki lost her legs due to natural causes, and therefore the movie was going to end on a bittersweet note of her accepting this. Several scenes in this film actually seem to be building towards this, and therefore kind of felt a little out of place. And I think it would have been just so much more of a powerful message to have Tsubuki lose her legs, but eventually find some sort of happiness regardless. Again, I am trying to look at this from the creator's intent and not my own expectations, but what am I supposed to do when the ending might not have been their original intent? Regardless, I won't say this was a bad story overall. There were still plenty of powerful moments not only allow us to relate with Tsubuki's plight, but also Megami's moral quandaries. Is it really okay to sacrifice the happiness of one child over many others? What do you even say to the girl who might even lose their legs in the original ending? It's moments like these that could have pushed her into proper main character status in the actual show. Alas, more time had to go to that love triangle instead of a much better plot like this that could have been expanded into a much more interesting final arc for the show, but oh well. All that said, this film was just one of the most fun Precure films I've ever seen. Plenty of energy thanks to some great animation to match up with Funassyi's hype. Fantastic music, including an insert song that, while not poorly utilized in the main series, just felt so much more appropriate here. And a good story that might have been fantastic if they had just went all in. Still, this is an easy movie to rewatch just for the great laughs, action, and of course, you know who. With this series done, I should be moving on to Go Princess eventually. Yeah, there's some other stuff that I do want to tackle, as well as a new weekly series that I'm planning on doing every Wednesday. I'll keep that as a surprise for now, but in the meantime, I'll also be working on the Mahotsukai manga reviews, maybe a little Simple Gear, and maybe a certain other series I kept bringing up during this review. I just got a lot of ideas, so I won't make any commitments just yet, but I do hope that you guys stick around. And until then though, farewell for now my friends, and... I was kidding when I said you should take her home! Hey! Somebody stop that yandering!